My uncle Miguel had a harrowing experience whilst on a date in Mexico. It was 1980-something, and he was traveling around the country, living the dream. He was never lucky when it came to love. Still isn't. But whilst just outside Guadalajara, he met a girl called Ramona. According to him, she was young, vivacious, and extremely beautiful. The pair of them went on a date together, and it went really well. As such, my uncle decided to stay in town a bit longer than he originally planned, just so that the two of them could have a second date. She was apparently a girl worth sticking around for. Not only was she super sexy and witty, she was also charming and sweet. It was only their second date, but he figured, who knows, maybe she's the one. He still wonders if she might have been to this day. My uncle and Ramona were having dinner in a restaurant, a fancy place that was out of most people's price range. He wanted to show off to her and make it obvious that he was serious about her. The restaurant itself was full, but one table of men in particular stood out to my uncle. They were dressed decadently, but tastelessly. White suits, gold chains, sunglasses indoors. They were making twice as much noise as all of the rest of the diners combined. Put it this way, it was clear to everyone in there that these guys were narcos. Still, they ignored the men as best they could and sat down for their meal. The conversation was flowing, and according to my uncle, there was a definite chemistry between him and Ramona. The whole evening, however, the group of narcos were eyeing up my uncle's date. It was making them both feel a little uneasy, so after dessert, my uncle quickly waves to a waiter for the check. The waiter appears uncomfortable, sweaty. He approaches my uncle and tells him not to worry about the bill. Apparently, their dinner had already been paid for. "What are you talking about? Who paid our bill?" my uncle asked. The waiter gestured to the group of narcos. They were all looking over at him, raising their glasses. This obviously spelled trouble. You could tell just from the way these guys looked that they had something planned. Knowing the type of men they were, most people probably would have stood up and walked out of there as fast as they could, not wanting to engage them. My uncle, however, was a proud man, and didn't want to seem weak in front of his date. He wasn't about to be shown up by these Pablo Escobar wannabes. He approached them with his chest puffed out, acting as confident as he could. He planned to politely tell them that he didn't need their charity. Before he could say anything, however, one of the men, a guy dressed in all white, asked him a question. "Did you enjoy your dinner with your wife?" "She's not my wife," my uncle replied. "She's my date." "Huh, that's lucky for you. She's very pretty." Confused, my uncle simply said, "I want to pay for our food myself. How much do I owe you?" With what my uncle describes as the purest look of soullessness he's ever seen, the man in white says, "No, consider it a goodbye gift, because after this, you'll never see her again." Nobody at the table laughed. All of the men just smiled at my Uncle Miguel. These guys were being serious. My uncle doesn't respond, just walks back to his date and hurries her out of the restaurant. He and Ramona jumped into his car and sped away, leaving only dust clouds in their wake. He continued driving for what must have been 45 minutes through the desolate Mexican countryside, checking his mirrors every few seconds to see if they were being pursued. From what he could tell, they had gotten away. Needing to fill up his tank, my uncle pulled into a gas station in this barren area. He had no other choice, they were running on fumes. As he got out of the car to fill her up, 3 other cars also pulled in, surrounding my uncle's vehicle. They had been followed after all. A number of men got out of the cars, aiming guns at my uncle and his date. They then took Ramona, kicking and screaming, threw her in the back of one of the cars, and drove off with her. There was nothing my uncle could do to stop them. He had never been so powerless in all his life. All he could do was watch as the cars drove over the horizon and out of sight, taking with them any trace that Ramona existed, and any chance of a happy future that my uncle and her could have had together. Whoever the guy in white was, he was right. That night really was the last time my Uncle Miguel saw Ramona. For all he knows, she may have died that very night, or might still be alive today somewhere. Whatever happened to her though, he's sure it doesn't bear thinking about. Things like this happen from time to time in Bandito country. Most of the time, people don't even report these abductions to the police, terrified of what might happen if they do. I once dated this guy who was a skydiving instructor. I'd been on a few jumps before I even met him, but after our second date, he told me that a nighttime skydive was a cool way of mixing things up and experiencing something new. He offered to take me on one of these jumps for our next date, completely free of charge. I excitedly accepted. The night rolls around and we fly up into the sky. I'm strapped to his front, and he has the chute on his back. We're at the door to the plane, ready to jump out. Then, real deadpan, he whispers this in my ear. "I like you a lot, Ellie. That's why I've got to tell you something. I've had enough of living, so I cut the cords to the parachute. I'm taking you with me." Then he jumps, with me strapped to him. Since I'm able to retell this story, I don't need to tell you that this was his idea of a funny joke. Yeah, real funny. I spent the whole descent watching the ground get closer and closer, terrified that I was about to splatter into oblivion. Thankfully, the parachute did deploy, and now I can tell you, 3 years after all of that, I married that man. Nah, only joking. I dumped his ass the second my feet hit solid ground. I later learned that night dives are for experienced skydivers only, and that he shouldn't have even taken me up there with him. Guys, listen, girls love a man with a sense of humor. But you know what they say about comedy? It's all about timing. Just choose your moments. This isn't a date story, but the guy involved did try to use his charm to deadly effect. Had my own circumstances been different, well, you'll see. It happened in California in May of 2015. I had graduated college in June of 2014 and moved back to my old hometown. Started a consulting company with my boyfriend, which was going very well. We had just finished a contract in the Bay Area, and were beginning a new one about 8 hours south of Torrance. He moved down there first to start setting up, while I took care of the loose ends at our closing contract before moving down to meet him. The day comes, and I pack my car and head south down the I-5. For the uninitiated, it's a straight highway with little in the way of scenery, aside from the occasional strip mall. Its monotony has a reputation for putting drivers to sleep at the wheel. I pass a strip mall with gas and a fast food joint and decide to fill up my car and my stomach. I go to park in the food venue's parking lot, but it's completely full. Thus, I park across the street at a hotel, which at the time I didn't think anything of. I go inside and eat my meal, then cross the street to get back to my car. I'm well into the hotel parking lot when a pickup truck pulls down the aisle and cuts off my path. It stops, with the passenger side facing me. The driver is alone. He's a clean-cut white male in his mid-30s. I don't remember anything about him, except that he looked very generic and buttoned up. The way he pulled up in front of me to block my path didn't initially set off any alarm bells. He did it very organically. He rolls down the window and says, "Excuse me, miss, but could you tell me where the grocery store is in this town? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not from here, so I couldn't say. Oh, where are you from? Good question. I don't know. Not here, though. I didn't say that to be rude. I'd just moved through so many cities at that point, and was on my way to a new one, so I wasn't really sure how to answer. He laughs and makes a joke, then asks me where I'm headed. I mention that I'm moving. I will say, he was very charismatic, and at this point, I think he's just trying to flirt with me. If I hadn't been so exhausted or in a relationship, on another day it might have worked. He makes another comment about how unpleasant moving can be, and then he gives me a warm chuckle and extends his hand to shake mine. Well, I'm glad I got to meet you. I'm Scott. If you recall, the truck is in front of me, with the passenger's side facing me. I actually take a step forward to shake his hand, and then got the delayed response of every alarm bell that should have gone off earlier. 1. I'm in a hotel parking lot. 2. He asked me a question that establishes I don't know where I am. 3. Another question that establishes I'm alone. And 4. Another question that establishes I'm not expected at my destination for many hours. The thing that connected all these synapses? When he extended his hand, he didn't make even the faintest effort to make it accessible to me. He didn't move over the seat to move toward me in any way. His hand was hovering comfortably over the center console, waiting for me to grasp it, which, in order to do, I would have had to lean well into the car. Again, I had already taken a step toward him, and I had already begun to raise my hand to shake his when the sirens went off. I rocked backwards, back to where I was standing, and I just remember looking in his eyes for what felt like forever, feeling everything click into place, while also half convinced that my imagination was just running wild. His hand is still waiting. I lowered mine and felt my eyes slightly narrow with suspicion. Slowly, I said, "I'm going to walk away from your car now, Scott." Boom. Truck burns rubber with thick grey smoke as the guy guns it out of the hotel lot at 100 miles an hour. He must have fucking floored it. Regrettably smart on his end, because I didn't have the license number or anything to offer the police. In the immediate minutes following the event, I felt relieved, but hadn't fully processed the full weight of what had just happened. Unfortunately for me, I had many more hours to think back and analyze the whole interaction to shreds. The car was somewhat lifted. There could have easily been another person, or even 2 or 3 other people hiding inside. Would he have pulled me in? Would I have been injected with something? Then my mind just kept creating all these scenarios where I wake up hours later and nobody would have known where in my drive I went missing, or possibly not noticed for most of the day. I still get creeped out thinking about how close I came to taking his hand, and how fortunate I was that I didn't allow my reaction to be driven by manners, which criminals often take advantage of. There was this girl I reconnected with a few years ago. We'd had a boyfriend-girlfriend type thing back in 4th grade. I thought one day that it would be good to look her up. I did, and we got to talking. A few months into our new rekindled friendship, I invited her over to come and watch some Netflix, intending to get a little more intimate with her. She said she was feeling a connection, and I was too, so why not? After a while, she was giving off all sorts of signals while we were cuddling up on the couch. Rubbing my leg, cuddling up closer and closer every now and then. So I made a move to kiss her and touch her stomach. She backed away. Okay, bad signal. I backed off. She cuddled up to me again, and we stayed like that for an hour or so. After a while, I asked if she wanted me to drive her home, or if she wanted to stay the night at mine. She said that she'd stay the night and catch a ride in the morning. Cool, but she slept downstairs on the couch. No big deal, it wasn't my night, whatever. Halfway through the night, I wake up to her standing over me. She's naked. She's removed my bedsheets and blanket and pulled down my PJ shorts. She was just standing over me. Nothing else had happened as far as I could tell. After I got my composure and asked if she was freaked out and wanted to stay in my bed or something, I noticed it. She had brought a chef's knife from my kitchen and put it on my nightstand, like she was going to use it for purposes related to either my life or my genitalia. I didn't say a word. I called her parents and they rushed over to pick her up. I didn't go into details with them, just said that she had a psychotic episode and needed to go home or to the hospital. When they got there to pick her up, her mum just said sorry, and that was it. Not another word was spoken. I haven't seen or talked to her or her parents since. I didn't message her, and she didn't bother to message or call me. It's been 3 years. It still creeps me out every now and then. Like one time, my girlfriend had gotten sick during the night, and she was poking me with her nail from my side of the bed. I freaked out a little, thinking it was her. I'm just glad I woke up when I did that night. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I know it's been quite a while since the last video, but I've had a lot on my plate recently, so hopefully you'll forgive me for that. And I'm gonna try get a better, more regular schedule going. I know I say that a lot, but yep, I'm going to try hard this time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please show your support by smashing that like button, or I'll smash you. Until the next one, guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.